What if the world became so corrupt, so filled with violence and evil that God chose to press the reset button? The Bible describes a time just like that. A time when humanity's thoughts were continually evil. A time when mysterious beings known as the sons of God took wives from the daughters of men, and giants walked the earth. Then came the flood. But what exactly does the Bible say happened in the days of Noah? Tonight, we're going to examine the biblical account carefully, directly, and without myth to understand what Scripture actually records. The story begins in Genesis chapter 6. It tells us that as mankind multiplied, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves from whomever they chose. Now, this passage has been debated for centuries. Who were these sons of God? Some say they were the descendants of Seth, the righteous lineage. Others argue the term refers to angelic beings, since this same phrase is used in the book of Job to describe heavenly beings. While scholars debate their identity, the text is clear on the result. The Nephilim were on the earth. These were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. But then comes the turning point. The atmosphere of the world had grown dark. Genesis 6-5 declares, "The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." Think about that. Not just some evil thoughts, but every thought only evil all the time. The text says the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was filled with violence. Corruption had spread like a plague. And so God declared that a judgment was coming, a cleansing, a flood that would wipe the slate clean. But in the middle of this global cesspool of corruption, one man stood apart. Genesis 6-8 is one of the most hopeful verses in the entire account. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Scripture describes Noah as a righteous man, blameless in his generation, who walked with God. Because of his faithfulness, God chose him for an incredible, almost impossible task. He instructed Noah to build an ark, a massive vessel constructed of gopher wood, sealed with pitch to make it waterproof. The dimensions God gave were incredibly specific: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. To give you a modern perspective, that's about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. This was not a symbolic instruction. It was an architectural blueprint. A real structure built to survive a real, impending catastrophe. God's warning was stark. A flood of waters would come upon the earth to destroy all flesh. Everything on the earth shall die. But he also established a covenant, a solemn promise to preserve Noah, his family, and representatives of every kind of animal to repopulate the world. Then, the day came. Genesis chapter 7 describes the cataclysm in vivid detail. It wasn't just a heavy rainstorm. The text says, "The fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened." This suggests a twofold source of water. From below, as subterranean waters burst forth, and from above, as rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights. The waters prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated on the surface. The text is emphatic about the scale of this event. It wasn't a local flood. It states that the waters prevailed so mightily that all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. The language is unequivocally global, and the result was total devastation. All flesh died that moved upon the earth, birds and cattle and beasts, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, and every man. Only those safely inside the ark survived. For 150 days, the waters covered the entire world. After those 150 days, the Bible says God remembered Noah, and the waters began to recede. Slowly, painstakingly, the water levels dropped. Eventually, the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. After months of waiting, Noah finally stepped out onto dry land. The world he emerged into was completely new, cleansed, and empty. And what was the very first thing Noah did? It was an act of worship. He built an altar to the Lord and offered burnt offerings, a sign of gratitude for their deliverance. In response, God made a covenant with all of humanity and every living creature. The beautiful, vibrant rainbow became the sign of that covenant, a divine promise that the earth would never again be destroyed by a flood. But the world after the flood was not identical to the world before it. It was a reset. In Genesis 9, God formally gives humanity permission to eat animals and establishes the principle of human government and accountability for human life. The rules had changed. It was a new beginning. What's fascinating is that this story isn't confined to the Bible. Flood accounts appear in ancient cultures all over the globe. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh contains a strikingly similar story of a global flood, a chosen man, and the boat. We find ancient Greek flood traditions, countless Native American flood stories, and various Asian flood narratives. While the details vary, the core elements are often the same. Divine judgment, a catastrophic flood, and a small group of survivors. From a biblical worldview, these global flood myths could be fragmented cultural memories, echoes of the one true event recorded in Genesis. But the story of Noah isn't just about the past. It's also a powerful prophecy about the future. In the New Testament, Jesus makes a striking statement. He says, "As the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." So, what were the days of Noah like? The Bible tells us it was a time of widespread corruption, complete moral collapse, rampant violence, and a casual disregard for divine warnings. People were just living their lives, eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, completely unaware and unprepared for the judgment that was about to sweep them all away. The comparison is a chilling wake-up call. The biblical flood, according to Jesus, was not merely a historical event. It was a prophetic pattern. So, when we look back at the account of the flood, we see it's not simply a story of destruction. It's a profound story of both judgment and mercy. That's a story of God as righteous judgment upon a world that had become irredeemably corrupt. But it's also a story of His incredible mercy, shown through the preservation of one family. A covenant of grace was made, and humanity was given a second chance, which leaves us with a final, lingering question. If the days of Noah were a warning, what are they warning us about now? If you are interested in biblical history, ancient mysteries, and the deeper story behind our civilization, then subscribe to our channel, because history may not simply be moving forward. It may be echoing. Thanks for watching.